Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Torrance, and you're listening to or watching Magic is Real. Today's guest is Ginny Jablonski. Ginny suffered from a chronic and painful medical condition for which she was prescribed fentanyl. She had an adverse reaction to the drug and stopped breathing, which resulted in her dying, leaving her body, and ultimately returning to complete an unfulfilled life purpose. Today, Ginny is an intuitive healer, animal intuitive, horse medicine facilitator, inspirational speaker, and opioid crisis advocate. Ginny and I hope you enjoy our conversation. If you do, it would really mean a lot if you can like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you so much, and here's my interview with Ginny Jablonski. Hello, everyone. Today, my guest on Magic is Real is Ginny Jablonski. Ginny, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you about so many things.
Me too. I have so many questions. So, Ginny, why don't you tell our audience what is it that you do? Because I know many things that you do.
Well, I work from an intuitive perspective with both humans and animals. I work utilizing shamanic principles to help people become more self-aware, people who are on a journey like we all are, and who may be what some people might consider stuck or in a bit of a funk. And believe it or not, animals can get stuck in a funk too. In the animal community, I'm most well known for working with traumatized animals. And I believe that's because I honor the fact that they have souls and they have opinions and they are creator beings and are able to be affected by the human paradigm as well. So
That's so well said. In fact, I have a lot of questions about that. I always have questions such as, and we can get into it, but, such as I believe that all souls are go to the same place when we pass, the same dimension, whatever you want to call it. But then I always wonder things like, what about bugs? And like, I know that their energy goes there, but do they have a life review and that that sort of thing? So first we'll start with, I really want to get to know you, Ginny. I'd love to hear about who you are, how you grew up, perhaps what your spiritual attitudes were as a young person, and just what did your life look like before you had a near-death experience?
Well, I'd say pretty much like most people who are brought up in the United States of America. Um, Broken family, a mother with multiple husbands. I did have a near-death experience when I was 3 months old, but we can touch on that later. Um, I was raised Methodist, and by the time I think I was 11 years old, I raised my hand in Sunday school and said, but what about the people that live in China that never hear about Jesus? And I was shut down and say, well, they just go to hell. So I pretty much knew intuitively that this was not an education that I was supposed to internalize from a young age. And then when I was 16, I was molested by a priest, a father of a friend of mine who was like a Baptist minister or a priest of some sort. I don't remember the church. Um, but it was quite traumatic, and that put the kibosh on anything religious for me until I was in my 40s when I had my second near-death experience. Um, like many other people, I went straight to work after school, and I was recruited into international security. So I had a job that was amazing, and I loved it. And I had a family and a failed first marriage, like a lot of people. And eventually I got sick. The job was very stressful, and I medically retired, trying to get doctors to help me figure out what was wrong with me. And the misdiagnosis period lasted about 7 years, where I refused medication, refused narcotics or opioids. I think I was prescribed them at some point, thinking that it might help, like a very low dose, 5 milligrams of hydrocodone or something like that. And it just made me sleep, and it didn't touch the level of pain that I had. So I really refused for the better part of 7 to 8 years any opioid dependency in any way, or use. And I think it was about 2008 when the doctors said that they were done trying to diagnose me and figure out what was wrong with me. I had just incredible pain, and they handed me a fentanyl lollipop, and that was the beginning of a very slippery slope. And then in 2012, I had a near-death experience resulting from the fentanyl, an
Wow.
unintentional overdose. But I think the doctors know how much medication they're prescribing. So,
Yeah, I've had some frustrating medical journeys myself. Not anything as serious, but of dealing with an HMO that really didn't want to get to the root of my problem. And so, in fact, I've talked about it on the show of having lost my voice, and I'm a voice actor because
mm,
I had SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and the HMO. That was the first thing I asked them to test for. They said,
mm,
"Nope, we don't test for that." Put me through every other expensive, invasive test, anesthesia under the sun to say, "Yes, you have severe reflux. You need to take um, PPIs." And for any of you that don't know what that is, it's proton pump inhibitors that lessen your stomach acid. Well, that only breeds more overgrowth. And they said, "Ma'am, you need to do what we're telling you to do." And I kept saying, "I'm not comfortable with this protocol. I really think that I have a disruption of my gut." For a year and a half, I couldn't work anymore. I had vocal cord dysfunction. I had acid reflux in my nose. And it only took getting out of that to find a doctor that said, "You have severe methane overgrowth happening. No wonder your vocal cords are spasming, and no wonder you're 102 pounds and have gastritis and reflux. And
mm.
no, PPIs aren't the answer." So I really appreciate where that's going. And we'll talk about that too. What also I want to ask you about, because I am finding such a corollary, I think that's the word, between, well, there most people I've interviewed, or many of them who have had near death experiences, had near death experiences before the main one. It
Mm.
feels to me, and sort of we talked about this a lot, where it feels to me like there are certain people whose souls were meant to have these experiences to help them on their journey to becoming a healer, to spreading the message that there's more to life, and that death is actually an illusion. Can you tell us a little bit about the near death experience you had when you were 3 months old? Because, of course, from our human perspective, you wouldn't remember when you're 3 months old, right? So, but I've heard many people have had that happen too, even before they came into the world, perhaps.
Yes, pre-verbal experiences and prenatal experiences, absolutely, absolutely. For me, I remembered my experience when I was 3 months old. I believe it was 2018, late 2018, and it was unintended. It was during an energy healing session that literally became an impromptu hypnotic regressive experience. And I just began crying hysterically, and I couldn't figure out why I was crying. From a human perspective, it wasn't intentional, but when I tapped in energetically, I began to see a baby. And then I inquired, who is this baby? It was me. And I remembered in that moment that my mother had told me that I had almost died of whooping cough when I was 3 months old.
Mm.
I had been packed in ice in a tent and turned just completely blue. And she had told me, and it was sometime in my youth when she told me this. Um, I don't recall discussing it again with her, but in that moment, I remembered her saying, it didn't look very good. The doctors weren't optimistic. That's what I recall from my youth anyway. In that regressive experience, I remember going into what people refer to as the void, or a black velvety energy. There are many different varieties of near-death experiences that have been beautifully cataloged by PMH Atwater and others. Um, and this is one of the primary flavors of near-death experience, basically, where you just go to the void and you experience a loving voice. There aren't necessarily beings there, but you are conversing someone that some people say they could perceive. I don't recall being able to perceive. I just knew that it was some version of the creator.
Hmm.
You know, people might call this energy God or the creator source.
Yeah.
And I was just hysterical saying, please don't make me go back there. I can't do this. And apparently this was one of my out clauses, you know, 3 months old. And I was fighting, arguing back and forth with this being that this was going to be a very difficult life. I was going to be abused emotionally, physically, neglected, abandoned, molested, raped multiple times in my youth. And he kept telling me over and over that I had to go back. There was something important I had to do. And we fought back and forth 7 or 8 times to my recollection in that. And I was hysterical as I was recalling this, just hysterical. And my anger at God or the creator was so palpable in that experience. And the last thing he said to me is, you're going back. There's something important you have to do, and I will make you stronger to withstand it. And I believe in hindsight, it was because of that grace, that additional strength that he gave to me that helped me survive everything that I went through in my early life.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting and incredible. And it really, I think it's so hard because I'm very aware of how our souls choose the paths that we're on because there's a reason. It's helping us grow and learn and to evolve. And on the other side, this is just a blink of an eye. So it's easy for us to make that choice when we're there from that perspective. When we're here, enduring trauma like that and abuse is just unbearable. And it's not the blink of an eye. It's ongoing and and even if it happens in the blink of an eye, relatively, you're still going to have trauma for the rest of your life. So it's hard, but to say that because I'm always afraid of minimizing someone's pain, to say, well, your soul chose this. And so I don't say that to people, but it is so interesting how that's really more evidence that that is the way it works. And that, we do have to kind of go through some of the things that we go through for our soul's betterment, which is so hard to try to understand. So now take us to just before the second near death experience and kind of what led up to it. And then if you can explain what you did experience that day, that would be great.
Sure. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just respond to what you just said.
Please.
Um, Over the past decade, I have heard many people say, and I have come to resonate deeply with the notion that one of the reasons souls come to this planet is to reconcile our will with the will of the creator.
Hmm.
And so that conversation is what you just talked about, the struggling our trauma while we're here, struggling to relate the level of trauma we experience while we are here with the original soul purpose.
Mm.
And I would like to say that for me, I just want to be clear, the important thing that I believe the creator meant me to do was evolve as a soul. And that is the work that I believe I'm undertaking and that I've been learning about for the past decade as if it was a full-time job, is to
Hmm.
become more self-aware and honor my soul and the choices that my soul has made and begin to take that information and that understanding and change my life and share that experience with other people. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be clear about that. Um, I was on fentanyl for about 4 years. And the first time I did come home with the fentanyl lollipop, my husband went on the FDA website and looked up the warnings and indications. And he said, Ginny, you realize if you take this medication, your brain can forget to tell your lungs to breathe. And that's exactly what happened. the doctor had just increased my dosage of fentanyl from 125 to 135 micrograms per hour in a patch. It's like mainlining,
Mhm.
you know, um, a medication 100 times more powerful than morphine.
Wow.
And then they also prescribe you oral medication for what they call breakthrough pain. And mine happened to be Dilaudid. And over the years, the Dilaudid prescription had increased from 2 milligrams to 8 milligrams. So the night I went to bed 10 years ago, I was on 135 micrograms of fentanyl and 8 milligrams of Dilaudid. I had taken that combination for the first time. I had just had my medication increased. And I was propelled out of my body, um, just into a very calm, infinite white space with no floor, with no ceiling. And in front of me, it's really hard to say how the distance wise, but it was maybe 50 yards away or so was a beautiful deciduous tree. And to some people, that symbolism might represent the tree of life. To some people, a shamanic tree. My own personal tree of life, I can't say. I didn't inquire about the tree. But there was a man that looked very much like Jesus, and and I understand that is not his given name. And I understand that my perception of him is based on the time in my youth when I was raised in a Methodist faith, where all the pictures of Jesus were sort of this color hair and blue eyes and white skin. And so that's how the being appeared to me, because that was my vision, my version of the man most people refer to as Jesus. And he held out his hand to me and said, "You've suffered enough. Come with me." And in that moment, I realized that I was me, that I was kind of looking around like, is my body like, I'm here? I'm thinking. And I thought, boy, I took a lot of drugs today. Only prescribed drugs, and please don't get me wrong, but I'm been taking a lot of medication. And it makes sense. I must be dead. And the first thought I had, which was so ironic, was, well, who would take care of my husband if I left? And you have to know how my husband cared for me during that time. He brought me meals in bed and took care of the house and did the grocery shopping and did the laundry and tended to our ranch and drove me to my doctor's appointments, because on that much fentanyl, you cannot drive a car, at least, and sleep at night, because
Yeah.
ethically, morally, I felt that it was wrong. I didn't have my license taken away from me, but I just stopped ceasing to believe that it was appropriate to drive a car. Or,
Mhm.
I stopped believing that it was appropriate. So I was just about to go with Jesus. I thought, it's okay. And I had this sort of a release, and I reached forward and I was touching his hand, and I heard a bit of a commotion behind me, and I turned and looked behind me, and behind me were about 70 donkeys and 40 horses from a sanctuary that I volunteered at for several years prior to my near-death experience. My husband and I had a ranch, owned horses, and at a certain point during my illness and on the opioids, it wasn't safe for me to train on the ground or to ride. And so we placed one of my horses in a home and one of my horses in a sanctuary. And I went to visit him just about every day that I could, immediately after putting him in the sanctuary. And then it was maybe 5 or 6 days a week, and then 4 or 5 days a week, and 3 or 4 days a week. And it was all I could do was get in the car and drive the 1.5 miles to the sanctuary where my horse was. But that was pretty much my life. And while I was there, there were 39 or 40-ish other horses there and 70 donkeys. And I would just take a brush and sort of wander around and just walk through the herd and brush horses. And they came, in my near-death experience, they came to me and said, don't go, don't go. don't you remember there's something important you have to do? And it was an immediate knowing, an immediate remembering that there was something important I had to do. And in hindsight, that's exactly what the creator said to me in my 3-month-old NDE, was that I had something important I had to do. I had no idea what it was whatsoever. But I just turned around and kind of smirked at Jesus and I said, sorry, Jesus, I'm going with them. And then just like a flash, I was back in my body. And that was very painful, excruciatingly painful. I don't know how long I was gone, several minutes, maybe 15 or so. My lungs were on fire. I had had some sort of a heart event. My heart had stopped. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. It felt as if, a 300-pound elephant was sitting on my chest, or man was sitting on my chest. And it was horrific. I was really scared and I frightened my husband. Of course, it was about 1:30 in the morning when I woke up. And he got me calmed down and asked, if we could just get a good night's sleep for the rest of the night and then talk about it in the morning. And in the morning, I said to him, I don't know why, but I want to live. It doesn't seem logical that there's something for me to do because I was bedridden. I was useless. I wasn't a productive member of society. I didn't have a job anymore. I couldn't volunteer. When I first retired in 2001, I volunteered. I wrote grants. I taught inmates in prisons how to quilt and children in juvenile hall how to quilt. And I had a somewhat active social life. At least I advocated for children with special disabilities, and I lobbied Congress for medical benefits for soldiers. And so I was very active, but over the years, all of that went away and I was pretty much bedridden. So to say to him, there's something important I have to do, really wasn't a very logical statement, but he loved me and he said, I believe you, and whatever it takes, I want you to live. And my response was, if I'm going to live, I have to get off of this medication. And he said that he supported me and he put his money where his mouth was. Really, truly, he supported me over this past decade on an amazing journey, going from an awareness of, on a scale of 1 to 100, of absolute zero in
Yeah.
terms of spirituality, in terms of self-awareness, and to a place where I am now, which I'm very comfortable and very, very happy to be in this place. It was a lot of work to get here, though, a lot of
Yeah.
work.
Now, to get off of the medication, did you do it medically supervised or did you say, I'm going to do this my own way? And did you taper off? What was it that you learned about how to get off of the drugs in order to heal yourself? Because it sounds like your condition was extremely debilitating.
Yes, that's a fascinating question, and I'm really glad you asked that. A lot of people don't ask that question. I went to my pain management doctor and I said that I would like to get off of opioids, that I had a near-death experience, I wanted to live, and I was told nobody ever gets off of opioids. You just eventually die.
Wow. That's encouraging.
And I said, well, make a list and put my name at the top.
Yeah.
And he then again said, I have thousands of patients, and in my career, only 2 of my patients have decreased their dosage of opioids. And I said, again, make a list, put my name at the top, or I'll be number 3, right? And it was against medical advice. They did not advise it, but I asked them to please decrease by 25 micrograms. And they weren't happy about it, but they allowed me to do it over a period of a couple of years. And it was very, very difficult. I went through what you can imagine would be typical withdrawal symptoms. It was emotionally very difficult. It was a roller coaster. There was pain, there was uncertainty, there was anxiety and stress and sleepless nights and just anxiousness and fear. And all of this while my husband was working at home in the other room. You know, he got to the point where he had to keep his door locked if he was on an important phone call, so I wouldn't run in and just blurt out some, distressing thing. It was
Right.
very, very difficult. It was very difficult. And it took me a few years to do it. I didn't start um, immediately. I had them decrease the dosage right away because I had just had an increase in dosage.
Hmm.
So when I first went back, I just had them take me back to the level I was before, and I threw away all the Dilaudid, and I promised myself I wouldn't take Dilaudid anymore. And so
Right.
I felt that I was safe there until I could determine a safe way to heal myself, and or do something that would be a substitute for the pain, which I had no concept of what that might look like. And
Right.
so for a couple of years, I began researching this world of alternative medicine and energy healing that I had no knowledge of whatsoever. So that's how I did it. I will share that after I got off of the opioids completely, which I believe was January 2015, I I started in, I believe it was June 2014, June-ish 2014, and then I rapidly, like 25 micrograms a month, and was able to decrease because I had done enough energy work that I felt that I could support myself, and with the support of alternative practitioners. But after I was completely off in January 2015, I went back to the same doctor and I said, okay, I'm off now. How do I get my memory back? And how do I get my body back? Because I had a series of small strokes after that near death event, and some pretty difficult challenges to overcome. And he basically said, and I think I can quote it directly, there are no studies in overcoming the long-term use of opioids because no one ever lives long enough to study them.
Wow. That's so sad.
So I speak out publicly. As you can tell, I'm not the most fluent, spontaneous speaker right now. I have had difficulty with my vocabulary recall and my memory, so I do apologize to your audience if I don't seem to be fluid or I'm pausing and looking for words. I speak out publicly, but I generally will speak from a written statement that I read, and I've been invited to be keynote speaker several times at chiropractic organizations and naturopathic, holistic nursing organizations and that type of thing. And I try to share this information with anyone who's willing to listen. And there's a lot more to the story. There's a lot more about some of us and some of our pain being able to be relieved through um, clearing repressed emotions and
Hmm.
trauma, and through forgiving our family members and ex spouses and you name it. And this is part of the journey that I've been on, and the information that I very much enjoy sharing with people.
I really appreciate that because I actually have a very strong interest in mind body connection syndromes because my whole life I had these chronic things. I do have chronic migraines, which is hereditary, but I know that it can be managed through sort of like you were just talking about. I mean, these things, there's a whole new level of understanding in the community of sort of holistic medicine that the body keeps the score, right? And so I know that as someone who has muscle tension dysphonia, which started with a physical problem, which was reflux, causing my vocal cords to get irritated and spasm, causing me to have to strain to speak, causing muscle tension in my neck. Then the stress of that and losing my job and all my income caused a mind body connection syndrome. So now I have a panic disorder as a result that I've done hypnotherapy for. I do meditation and yoga. If sometimes my body just goes into a state of fight or flight. I'm not actually nervous doing my work. I mean, I've done voiceover for probably 20 years now. And it's like, oh, it used to be I would just hop up to the mic and just do my thing. And now I have to do a whole thing because my throat will involuntarily shut sometimes, just as a result of the trauma of losing my voice and also being a lifelong, highly sensitive person who has a very sensitive nervous system. And so I experience stress. My throat closes up. That's my thing. I know that fibromyalgia, PTSD, muscle tension dysphonia, um, chronic pain syndrome, all of these things are linked to trauma. It doesn't even have to be abuse, but it can be even just I've been stressed since I was a little kid. So I am fascinated by this whole thing because I found that once I realized that I had more control than I thought, doesn't mean you can cure PTSD, for example, or fibromyalgia, but you can manage the symptoms. I'm also a 12-step person who's done 12 steps to release a lot of these old stories and a lot of these old resentments. So I would love to hear you speak more about that and also kind of tell us what energy healing modalities that you explored and what actually worked for you. When did you start to see relief? I know it's a multifaceted question. Take it from anywhere.
Well, you're speaking to my passion. Your passion is my passion. It's no surprise to me that we have been connected through
Yeah.
mutual friends. I work from a very shamanic perspective. Have I been certified in different healing modalities that offer protocols and put things in a box and believe things, energy only works one way, and um, issues only have one root cause, and that type of thing. And I have pretty much walked away from the many different healing modalities that I had been certified in favor of the shamanic principles. And quantum physics is now proving to be true, that everything has a consciousness.
Mhm.
And in shamanism, depending upon the practice or the philosophy or the region that the tribes are from, different tribes believe that a human energy, luminous energy body, it comprises different levels of consciousness. So one, for example, one tribe or many tribes actually believe that we have three levels of consciousness, and that's the body, that's the mind, and the soul. There are other tribes that believe there are 9 levels of consciousness, and even more that believe there are 11 levels of consciousness. In metaphysics and in the fusion of contemporary psychotherapy and personal self-integration as created by Harvey Grady, who has um, institute in Sedona where he teaches personal self-integration to psychotherapy professionals, counselors, marriage and family counselors, psychotherapists, and psychologists and psychiatrists. They believe that the body has 7 layers or levels of consciousness, and that see if I can get all 7. There's the physical body, there's the emotional, the mental, the child, the shadow, and the masculine and the feminine. So I've studied many different philosophies that speak to consciousness and the different levels of disparate, really disconnected consciousness in the body. And I found in working with the body, we can speak to the cells in your eye. We can speak to your teeth. We can speak to your elbow. We can speak to the liver, to the hypothalamus, to the thyroid. We can speak to any organ, any gland, any cell of the body. And what I found was very relevant for me, and I suspect this may be highly relevant for you. I'm not looking into your energy field right now, but I would like to encourage you to have a further conversation with me after this experience today, because my nervous system was not communicating with my body and my mind anymore. My nervous system gave up because no one was listening to it. It was stressed, it was overtaxed, and it had basically said, nobody's listening to me. And nowadays, everyone is really focused on transcending this reality, ascension, evolution, higher levels of self-awareness. And in doing that, we have to become aware that there are multiple selves that are fractured, that need to be integrated. And when we can communicate with these different aspects of ourself, we can ask them what they need to heal and begin to reintegrate, to become a single being, a whole being.
That sounds good to me.
And I am not saying in all cases this is true, but I actually believe that PTSD and complex PTSD and some of the other things that you mentioned are resolvable. I truly do. And I have done over 17,000 hours of work, of studying, of traveling, of reading, of learning, of apprenticing, of, experiencing healing on myself, becoming more self-aware and seeking out modalities, very, like neurolinguistic programming, EMDR in psychotherapy, Chinese medicine, tapping, you name it. And I got to a point on my journey where I decided one day that I would have my voice analyzed, because there is a tone it was very obvious that there was a tone missing in my voice. And I had a lovely woman analyze my voice, and someone else recommended me to another new medical alternative device, right? Where you speak, they record your voice, and through a computer program, they determine which notes you're using excessively and which notes you're not using at all. And then the computer program generates music for you to listen to. It takes, I guess, 5 minutes a day. You listen to the music. Now, it's more geared to whatever specific thing or trauma you think about just before the test is performed. So if you were to use this protocol for healing everything that ever happened to you in your entire life, you'd be doing it for a month of Sundays, right? I mean,
Yeah.
doing it for quite a long time. However, to suss out something that you have previously not been able to identify, there's tremendous value in it. And so I had the test done, and it basically said allergy to milk. Yep, check, allergy to milk. And problem with your gallbladder. Yep, check, had my gallbladder removed. And then problem with your bladder. And sorry if this is too much information, but I'm 55, so
Yeah.
tiny bladder syndrome. And then number 4, repressed emotions. Oh, darn it.
Yep.
I didn't want to hear that. I had done so much darn work on myself. And that's when I really started looking into these other modalities that can help us to find the memories that the brain hasn't processed, that the body is expressing through pain or discomfort, because the body will express for us and remind us of those things. And it's been a really wonderful journey in discovering all of these different healing modalities, and seeing the results myself, that some of these modalities actually really do work. And
Yeah.
it's life changing. I mean, I never used to smile. I never used to joke around. I never thought anything was funny, no matter how funny it was. I was very serious and very stressed. And as anybody could guess, living a life of believing that I was a victim. And so I've really turned all of that around. And there are many, many ways that someone can approach a healing journey. And I think at least make significant progress, if not eventually get us the whole way there to wholeness, to health, to wellness. But I'm not saying it's for everybody,
Hmm.
because I know that each person is unique and we all have so many factors that are contributing, as you referred to earlier, their genetic and ancestral type traits. But even some of those can be resolved through some very deep inner work. And then there are environmental factors, and of course, accidents and severe traumas, and many different variety. So, and of course, I'm
Yeah.
not a doctor. I can't really speak to that scientifically or medically or from a psychotherapeutic perspective. But as a person who undertook a healing journey and tried many, many, many healing modalities, and I spent my husband's life savings on this journey, I'm pretty darn serious about it. And I've been a lot of places and met a lot of amazing people. So.
Wow, that's really encouraging. And I have a lot more questions, but I wanted to ask you, how do you feel today physically?
Well, one of the things I have not been able to overcome is something called degenerative disc and joint disease. So I
Hmm.
had significant degeneration in my sacroiliac region and my joints. And I have not yet been able to completely rebuild that. But I do feel better. I still don't have, I would say that I have what people would describe as chronic fatigue.
Yeah.
I am tired. A lot of activity, but I was bedridden for about 9 years. And to come back from that, I've been to physical therapy several times. And the physical therapists say that, this is just a very, very difficult thing to come back from.
Yeah, it sounds like it. But I'm glad that, I'm sure that sometimes it's all relative. When you've been through a chronic thing, you're like, well, I still have symptoms, but just looking back, even just like I said, I mean, not that mine was as severe as yours, but 2 years ago, I was 102 pounds. I could only drink liquids and it would come right back up. I had reflux in my sinuses. I had gastritis. I couldn't talk. And yes, I still have some flare ups here and there. And I still have some days where my voice doesn't work very well. But but if you look at 2 years ago and you look at now, I'd say, I mean, I am thriving. It's like, no,
Mhm.
now I've just learned to manage the symptoms in a better way, and so that's what I can relate to there. So I would also love to know after I know that you also are an animal communicator, and I assume that you're also, I believe I read this as well, that you also, do you do mediumship or just psychic work?
I do. I prefer not to do it for a living.
Yeah,
I feel that I prefer to focus on helping people understand themselves
yeah,
better, create a better relationship between themselves and their animal, help the animal overcome trauma, help people get to a better place in their life. And although mediumship can absolutely change a person's life through giving messages, it's not something that I am willing to dedicate a lot of time to because I
yeah.
feel that it distracts me from other things.
Well, yeah, that's great. I wonder after you had your near death experience, when did you start to notice that you had these abilities? I know we all have these abilities, but when did you start to notice them as having been enhanced?
Well, I don't believe that I was aware that I had any abilities before. Although right before my near-death experience, my auric field was like Swiss cheese, and a shamanic practitioner said to me, "I think you should prepare. I think you're in the final, transition phase." And during that time, I thought once or twice I heard my horse talk to me, but I wasn't really sure. I didn't really have that much information about that. Um, right away after my near death experience, I right away experienced a lot. It was as if all of my psychic senses were turned on up to high volume, and I didn't understand them and I didn't know how to control them. And it was quite chaotic for a while. My husband and I attributed it to the medication that I was on. And that's another reason why I desperately wanted to get off of the medication at that
Hmm.
point. It's not the only reason. I wanted to live, I wanted to heal. I felt there was something important to do. Um, and again, I really want to emphasize that the important thing isn't so much, the job I have now. The important thing was healing my own self and becoming aware of the multidimensional nature of my soul, and healing those wounds of the past that I had neglected to heal in past lives, and etc. So
Yeah.
it was right away. I could see dead people. I could see, unfortunately, I could see some stuff that wasn't so pleasant.
Hmm.
Trees talked to me, animals talked to me. There were dead people around, and um, I thought I was hearing voices, but what it turned out that I was actually hearing the trauma in people's nervous system.
Oh, wow.
I was hearing the unfortunate things that have been said to all of us that we haven't forgiven people for, that were trapped in the nervous system and that travel through the fascia and affect the muscles and the glands and that type of thing. So it turned out I was quite gifted. I just had no idea what any of it meant or what to do
Yeah,
with it or how to control it. And so it was quite chaotic and crazy making for some time.
I bet, as I'm developing Medium, I don't charge for it yet, because it's still in my first year. And I just kind of want to make sure that if I'm doing this, I'm really giving the best service, or I'd rather refer somebody to somebody that I know will they'll get more out of it than they will with me. But um, that being said, so so for example, when most mediums, when we hear from spirit, most of us don't actually see. I don't see your grandmother standing over you. I just sort of know that your grandmother's in spirit. So, and I just got actually funny, I just actually got a chill. And that's the second way, is then they say yes. And so when you say that do you remember the first time you saw a spirit? And to you, what did it look like? Did it look like another person in the room? Did it look like an apparition? How are you experiencing this with your senses?
Well, let me first say to you that knowing is the highest, most refined sense there is.
Hmm.
So please don't feel less than or judge yourself or compare yourself to people who can see. For a very long time, I was not able to see when I wanted to. And healers and shaman referred to it as being third eye blind, that I would see things, but it wouldn't be something that I intended. It would be accidental or brought into my awareness when I was unawares, when I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
Um, so please don't compare yourself to others, and know that the knowing is the highest sense. It
Mm.
truly is. Because there were times that I could say, there's a pink elephant in the room and she is 12 foot long and 6 foot tall, and she has blue eyes, and I know she's there, but I can't see her, but I can describe her.
Yeah.
So it was really a mixed bag for me because I have so many senses. What I discovered for me, resonated for me, was my truth, was that depending on the soul that I was interacting with, and sometimes unwillingly,
Yeah.
just because I didn't, my auric field was Swiss cheese. I didn't know how to manage my own energy, right? Um, I would sometimes see them uh, as like a full color HD IMAX movie, a film strip, that as if I was watching a movie at an IMAX theater.
Hmm.
And sometimes the beings or the visions would look like I don't know, I'm quite a bit older than you, but when I was little in the 60s, the cartoons were these black and white, very
Yeah.
grainy cartoons. Well, sometimes the images will appear like that,
Hmm.
opaque and having a bit of a form, but no color and not very clear. I can describe to people, your father's wearing a hat, a certain kind of hat that they wore in the 50s, or a hat that is more popular in Europe or in South America. I will, see flashes of clothing, and I'm just anything really. My experiences haven't been limited to any specific theme or chakra or ability. They've really run the gamut. So,
Yeah. And when was it that you understood that you were able to communicate with animals?
well, almost right away, because I would hear them talk. I would hear plants talk. I'd walk by a plant and it would say, "Hey, tell my owner that I need a bigger pot."
Yeah, I've heard this from other people, by the way, and it
Yeah.
sounds crazy, but I
Yeah.
also believe that plants have have
Oh, yeah.
consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Do
all
you
comes
hear
from
it?
the same place.
Do you hear it as a external voice, or do you hear it as a thought in your own head?
Sometimes it depends. Now, in the beginning of my journey, beings actually would connect into my transmediumship space, and I had to learn all about that, become very self-aware, understand the energy system, the psychospiritual apparatus, the transmediumship space, all of it, and learn how to manage my own. So that now, today, when I communicate, and in the last several years, it's as if I communicate through a phone booth. I don't allow anybody into my energy field. I
Mhm.
don't do any trans mediumship or anything like that. In the beginning, again, it was a mixed bag of a lot of experiences that were all learning experiences, because I could actually see somebody standing behind me, somebody standing in front of me. My energy field just did this, my chakra did that, And so having the sense of knowing, seeing, hearing, um, tasting, feeling, experiencing empathetic emotions, and that type of thing led me on a journey, because I was so curious and I had so many visions and I saw so many symbols, and that just propelled me forward to ask as many people as I could if they could explain what was happening to me. And if one spiritual philosophy or healing modality couldn't, I was on to the next one and on to the
Mhm.
next one, to try to understand everything that was being shown to me. So yes, the animals spoke to me right away, but I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be an animal communicator. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't even know what an animal communicator was. I had no desire to be a healer ever. And in fact, I truly don't. Even today, as I'm sitting with you, and this is what I do, and I'm well known for, I don't desire to heal anyone.
Mhm.
My passion is helping you remember that we are energetic, divine, infinite beings of light, and we have these different layers of consciousness, and we can heal them and integrate them and step into our power, and remember that we all have these gifts and abilities, and heal ourselves and move forward in higher levels of self-awareness. I don't ever operate as if you're a car and I know how to fix you and I can
Mhm.
just go into your energy field and fix something. And I never had that desire. A lot of people did that to me, and I was all too eager to be healed by others in the beginning, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. Laying on somebody's table for a half an hour or an hour for 300 or 500 or $600 an hour. And I was so enamored, and I had this sort of childlike wonder and innocence that I just believed anything that anybody told me. I
Mhm.
really didn't know. And I was shocked when there was competition in the healing world and the spiritual world. And I was shocked when people would say I'm right and they're wrong. And I started getting a sense and a flavor of things. And then some things that people were doing to me actually weren't helping me. They were creating distortion for me, and I had to undo some of what had been done to me. And that was a beautiful journey that my soul took me on, to remember many lifetimes where I had been a shaman, a healer, a sage, a medicine man, a baker, a candlestick maker, right?
Yeah.
All of these things. And literally, I had been a baker and a candlestick maker, you know. Um, and I was able to be shown the ways that I believed reality worked or energy worked, and how in some ways I suffered karmic consequence because of that. And how, people are doing this now. Of course, this is a planet of free will and free choice, and people can choose to have any experience they want. I think if they really knew the consequences of what some of them were doing, they wouldn't do it that way anymore. Because I know almost everyone that is in this field, they have a heart of gold. They truly want to be of service. But there's just this grave misunderstanding of the hero's journey. There's a grave misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of the wounded hero that has come from the shamanic initiation, the shamanic experience of a wound, of the wounding experience, whether it be some sort of accident or trauma or near death experience, and waking up and remembering, as I did, becoming self aware, but not knowing what to do with it, and then going on a healing journey. And as we heal different aspects of ourself, we then gather our medicine, our tools, and we begin to accumulate our medicine, and we can share that with others. But what's happening now is everybody just wants to be a healer, quit their day job and become a healer
Mhm.
as soon as they get their abilities, and they're just not self-aware enough to truly truly be able to help in the way they would like. And I wish
Yeah.
we all had more time and more money um, to really go on a journey, an internal journey to self-awareness, and spend the time that it really does take to experience many, many cycles of a hero's journey, and accumulate medicine in ways that really can profoundly assist people in their own awakening.
Yeah, that's a really important perspective, I think, to share. And when it comes to your animal communication, tell me what you how does that work? So if you have a client and they have an animal that has been traumatized, or even they just want to know what's on their pet's mind, how does that go? How do you go? I'm sure before COVID you would go in person or whatever, but tell me how it is that you work with the animal and the owner together,
Well, in order to explain that, I have to tell you how I got there quickly.
please.
So I
Please.
never intended to be a healer, but every healer I went to kept telling me I was healing them more than they were healing me. And it was mostly information exchange. I would help them to see something that they couldn't see. And that's how, healers have helped me, is to be able to see what we can't see.
Hmm.
And on that journey, several years into it, I was just told over and over, you have to share it. You have tremendously wonderful information. It's very accurate. Please share the information. So I started, but I only would charge like you, I said, $25. If you have
Right.
$25, I'm not, this isn't something that I really want to dedicate my life to, and I want to do other things, but I'm willing to do it. And pretty soon I was on the phone like 10 hours a day. I mean, it was out of control.
Yeah.
And what was happening, well, I first had to take a giant step back and say, this is too much. But what happened was, when I was working with the people and sharing what I had learned on my journey in overcoming a lot of the trauma and resolving the beliefs and doing really deep forgiveness work and finding the subconscious programs and patterns that were programmed into my own psyche, my own subconscious, um, doing that work and sharing it with people, animals started coming in. And I would say, oh, do you have a white cat? Or do you have a black horse? Or do you have a dog? It might be in spirit, or it might be alive, or. And so one day I meditated and I said to my guides, like, what the heck is going on? All of these animals are just really bothering me. And then this council of animals, who I now call my spirit helpers, came forward, and they were mostly horses. And they said, don't you remember? This is the important thing that you had to do. We guided you on your healing journey to experience how to help yourself energetically overcome the energetic effects of trauma. And now we want you to translate everything that you've learned about human trauma and apply it to the animals. So that's how it happened. And I thought to myself, well, but nobody knows I'm an animal communicator. How is that? And I can't even begin to tell you. It just sort of happened overnight. Just people started coming to me with, and when you say yes and you answer the
Mhm.
call, the phone rings and you say
Yep.
yes, the universe brings you the people and the animals. It's been
It's
phenomenal.
true.
I have
I
full
see.
body chills.
Yeah, yeah, me too, because I've seen that happen in my own life too. And even in mediumship, a lot of the people that have come to me to help me learn, it's word of mouth. And people keep going, oh, I loved the reading that you did for me. Can you? I have a friend, and people are sending them my way. And still, I'm like, I'm not charging yet, but I know that when it's time, it'll it'll come to me when I'm ready and when the universe is ready for that, for it to be in everyone's highest and best. So, yes. So when you do work with an animal, how do you perceive? What's your experience as you connect with the animal?
Well, I'm a bit different. I really don't consider myself an animal communicator. I consider
Mhm.
myself an animal intuitive, because what I do doesn't fall into the traditional guidelines or definition of just animal communication. And the way I work is that I honor the soul of the animal above everything, even the human being that is paying me.
Mhm.
And there's a recording on my website at the bottom of the homepage of my website. If anyone's interested, it's about 13 minutes, and explains why I work the way I do. And what I do is I do not allow the human to give me a picture of the animal or tell me anything about the animal. And it's not because I'm afraid that I'm going to get false information or be influenced. That's not it. It's because if the human, it verbalizes a story and says, this is what happened to the
Yeah.
animal will just say, oh, that's what they think, fine. And they won't open up.
Mhm.
So what I do is I honor the animal and I share my heart space with the animal. I speak to its soul and I speak to its guides and I get permission and I say, my name is Ginny and I work with animals and this is what I'm all about and this is how I work. And I want to know what your truth is. How do you feel? What do you think? Are you managing your own energy? Do you like the guides you have? Um, do you have any issues with your energy, with your physical body, with your food, with do you not like your animal companions? Do you have an issue with your training, um with your schedule? Anything. You can say anything to me. And animals are just as unique as humans are, so it never goes any specific way.
Mhm.
um but they will show me what is wrong. They will show me what is at the core of their trauma most times. Now, sometimes it takes an animal 2 or 3 appointments if they're really deeply traumatized to even be willing to share it with me or show it, because it is so painful for them to experience it.
Mhm.
And I think one of the most harmful things that is happening in the world of animal healing, animal communication, animal intuition these days is those mediums or communicators who only communicate with the part of the soul that has not incarnated in the body and therefore doesn't have that fractured consciousness, hasn't experienced the disassociation or the trauma. And they always get the fluffy, everything is
Yeah.
wonderful, I don't experience trauma, I'm here just holding the light and healing humanity answer. And it's very misleading to people. It's very, I think it's harmful to the animals, all animals. It's
Yeah.
very harmful. It denies their sentience, it denies their their personality. Some of them are entangled karmically with humans. Some of them have very strong opinions. Some of them have carried wounds from past life. It's not very common, but for the animals that come to me, it's common for me because I work with that kind of trauma. So those are the animals that tend to come into my sphere of influence.
Right. And how can we help animals to heal from their trauma? What are the what things can we do to help them heal?
Well, it's the very same thing that we can do to help ourselves heal. It's become more self-aware, get into our heart space, find the wounds of our heart, the trauma that we experienced when we were younger that is affecting our first, second, and third chakra. Open up our heart. Any sort of energy management, Tai Chi, Qi Gong, yoga, breath work, um, any sort of discipline that brings us into a more self-aware state. Um, and doing what heart math says. Breathe into your heart space, send love to yourself first, and then radiate that out either to a being or the world. And promoting a coherent heart rhythm for us slows down our energy field, even if temporarily, and allows our guides and our own soul to communicate with us. Where when we're in a very frenetic, we're angry or we're grief stricken, that try as they may, we just can't hear our guides. They can't get
Mhm.
through the muck and the mire of the trauma. And so that is one of the beautiful things that people experience in being around horses. They have large hearts, they have large electromagnetic energy field. And when humans come into that field, their heart then begins to come into coherence with the horse's heart. Their energy field calms down, they get out of the sympathetic back into the parasympathetic, and they can actually hear their own guides and feel the love of their own soul. And a lot of that is wrongly attributed to some magic ability horses have to heal people. And generally speaking, that's not true. Are some animals very gifted? Are some animals medicine horses, some dogs medicine dogs, some cats, but not all. And humans have failed so miserably at healing themselves, and psychotherapy and therapy and psychotropic medication, has failed all of us, that we're now going to animals to be healed. And I think there's a grave misunderstanding out there. And what we can do for them is the same thing we can do for ourselves. A lot of our animals are suffering because we are suffering, and they are mirroring our trauma, or they are taking on willingly our trauma because they're trying to teach us compassion, or they're trying to manage their safety, security, and survival just by bringing the emotional tone in the house down, or,
Yeah.
something like that. And certainly many animals have experienced real abuse, abandonment, neglect, etc. And that is very real. And they are affected in much the same way humans are affected by it. And to answer your question very briefly in a single word, love. Love is the answer. Love is the answer. And
Mhm.
if we can break into our own hearts, most of our hearts are just shut down. There is a shield. There is a heart wall. Dr. Bradley Nelson calls it a heart wall. I call it, a shield, or a lens through which we perceive everything and people perceive us, which is shut down, not letting it, not accepting love, not accepting joy, being afraid, not feeling safe, and all of those things, feeling unworthy, doubt, shame, grief, loss, unforgiveness. All of those things affect us so profoundly. We just don't realize what profound creators we are. And in our youth, we used that energy to protect ourselves. And as we are growing, we don't realize that those same systems of protection that we put in place to help us manage our energy, in our forgetfulness, really in our ignorance, are actually preventing us from healing and moving forward, because those energy processes are there and we're unaware of that. And so
Mhm.
animals have that very same thing. I mean, I've rescued my fair share of horses, and wild horses, and traumatized horses. And my husband and I always rescue the oldest and the sickest animals who have the most trauma. And we endeavor to help them heal so deeply at the soul level, so that when they cross over, they don't have to carry the wounds of this life with them. Now, in the wild, that would normally be facilitated. But our animals are in domestication. They don't have the pack or the pride or the herd to help them transition, and to help them remember the truth of who they are, that they too are divine, infinite beings of light, and have the ability to heal themselves. You would not believe the number of animals that I talk to that are like, what are you talking about? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean I can heal myself? And who are these guys over here anyway? That's your guides. Those are your spirit guides, your spirit. They're like, oh, I just didn't know who they were.
Right.
And it's very complicated. And unfortunately, we humans have painted ourselves into an intellectual corner. And the academic intellectual understanding of what is happening in our world is invalidating our infinite nature and our soul. It is being invalidated. And that is creating a lot of disease and distress.
Yeah, I believe it. Now, that's all so beautifully said. I also would love to hear from your having done this work. How do you think it works? I guess to sort of go back to my question about, but what about bugs and lizards and plants? And obviously, as human beings, we're very unique in that we have the ability to self-reflect, whereas an animal, highly intelligent, highly sentient, but they don't really know what's going on unless you talk to them, right? I mean, they're just kind of going with the flow. They're just going on instinct, and they're very loving and intelligent. But obviously, as human beings, when we cross over to the other side, we'll have things like, a life review and, oh, there's my grandma. And there's a higher level of, well, here's my question. As human beings, we have a higher level of, I would say, consciousness from our paradigm. But obviously, the soul has ultimate consciousness, no matter what form it takes. So I suppose my question is, how do we sort of make sense of it all? If do all souls come to this reality as a person, an animal, a plant, or there's sort of different levels of souls where it's like, this is more of just like an energetic blob, and that's going to become a plant. Do we recycle from human to animal to plant to rivers? So I would, it's very, I don't even know what my question is. I would just love to hear your take on all of that. Like, I always think, so when a bug dies, does it have consciousness and go to the other side and go, oh, this is so beautiful? Or is it just a bug with a little smaller speck of life energy in it?
Well, my perspective is that everything has consciousness. And in my experience, and there are many people who believe that animals are actually ascending now as humans are ascending, animals are ascending as well. It depends on the animal or the soul group that they're from. We each have a blueprint. So we have DNA. What is DNA? DNA is information. At its core, it is light, sacred geometry, right? It is light, it is programming. And I have seen many visions of souls coming all from the same source, literally going through what I can best describe from a very pedestrian
Yeah.
description. It's like going through a cloud of programming, and the soul is just this infinite divine being, and it goes through a cloud. It gets a blueprint to be a zebra, or to be a crocodile, or to be a dog, or to be a fish, or to be a bird. And so sometimes those souls stay within those soul groups. And my sense is that it was always intended that animals would be, for the most part, I will never write a book on how or why the universe was created. I don't consider myself a philosopher or a scholar or a quantum physics expert. So these are just my personal reflections. So please don't, everybody's truth is relative, right? And at all levels, something is true, right? Um, I see my sense is, what I've been told is that in the wild, the animals have experiences. They have they know that they're divine beings of light, and they're here to hold light, and they're here to be, let's say, one with all beings, and they know that they are in balance with one another, and they have, I think, a sense of the oneness. They many of them have that in the wild. In domestication, that has been largely forgotten, but it can be remembered. Different animal species, not necessarily breeds, but species, I believe, have different psychic gifts and abilities. So some can astral travel, some can actually heal, actually perform, shift energy, let us say, create a vibration that is so much higher than our stuckness, that in their presence, our energy begins to flow. And, some people would say there is no such thing as energy, there's only motion. So I'm really just using very layman, simple terms here to communicate. It's not in any way the totality of my knowledge or experience, but for most people, I hope that that's a pretty good description.
That really is. It's that's actually a different perspective I hadn't thought of. I have my own, I kind of just try to put together what I think, based on what makes sense. But I think that in general, we're never really going to know. Even people who have had near death experiences,
Mhm.
we're never going to really know what happens when you stay there and what that
Right.
experience is like. No one knows, even people like you. And I think we have a general idea, and we can only kind of piece it together from what we've experienced, what we've heard, what other people have reported back. So I know one day we'll know when we get there, but I think I love to explore the idea of animals as souls. And as a cat mom, I mean, those little guys, they're just pure love. And
Mhm.
sometimes I've looked at them, and I said to a friend of mine who's very Christian and spiritual, and I said, why is she so cute? Like, I don't understand how anything it's like she's my cat's so cute. I want to throw up when I look at her. And she said that God, according to, she's Christian, and she said they're there to let us love them. They're there to show us love. I mean,
Mhm.
and so they're just pure, they're like children. They're just pure, beautiful, innocent creatures. And that's why whenever I contribute to charities, it's always for animal protection of animals, because they don't have that voice. And they're just pure sweetness and beauty and just pure essence. So I really appreciated all of you sharing all of your insight today. And I would love for you to share. I will also link below your information, but how can people find you? And if you want to talk more about just kind of a rundown of what services you offer, go for it now. Anything you'd like to share.
Well, I wanted to just real quickly also say that in my experience, I have met animals who have also incarnated in other species bodies. So generally speaking, the Akashic records in this reality do not keep track of the past lives. For example, if a horse was a lion or something like
Mhm.
that, because it is very confusing for animals to remember other lifetimes as other species. But some souls seem to be incarnating now at this time on the planet to really help hold the light. They're very advanced, high level souls. And those souls didn't necessarily go through that programming phase to have that blueprint of only one specific animal. I don't know how that works, but I have seen it. I started seeing it early on, rarely, and it's more and more prevalent now. So I just wanted to also
Thank
share
you.
that with
Yeah,
you.
thank you for sharing that.
Um, well, I work with both humans and animals. I do intuitive work. I work very much from the perspective that I'm in service to your soul. So I won't know anything about you or your animal that is not appropriate for me to know. I will only know what the soul or the guides share with me in an appropriate way. I don't interfere with anyone's energy. I don't go into people or animals' energy field. Um, I am capable of generating a very high frequency of love, which I call little pink pillows of love. So if someone needs a little help or a little boost, I will generate a little pink pillow of love and I will share that with a person to help if they're stuck. But that's about the extent to which I'm willing to interfere in someone's energy. I provide information. I believe it's very helpful. I think I have a track record of being pretty darn helpful. There are hundreds of testimonials on my website that people can read, both human and animal experiences, and I don't abbreviate them. I allow people to write what they want to write, and I share their stories in their entirety. I do, because people want to express themselves and how their life has changed, or how their animals' lives have changed. Um, I try never to work more than with one or two clients a day. So I'm scheduled out quite a ways. It's not always easy to get in with me on, an emergency, but if someone is tenacious and they want to contact my assistant, her name is Michelle, you can email us at info@heartofthehorse.us. And that's my website, is heartofthehorse.us. And there's more information than you ever wanted to know about me there. And I've done maybe 30 interviews, and they're all available on my website. And they're all different, but they have a similar thread. People are very interested in near-death experiences. And I just wanted to comment quickly too. You said that there are so many different people having so many different experiences, and I really do honor all of the different experiences and messages that people bring back. And some are quite different. In fact, in many ways, contrary, right? And that's okay, because there's 8 billion people on the planet, and there's somebody out there who wants to hear my message, and there's
Mm.
somebody out there who wants to hear everybody else's message too. And we're all at different places on our journey, and no matter what, I think everything is true from the level at which it is received in our experiences, and I would never want to invalidate someone else's experience. So
That's so beautiful and thoughtful. And I do also think that people's experiences are different because you're shown what's personal to you. As you said, you saw Jesus, but you saw Jesus as you it, saw him as a child. So as we know, he was probably a darker skinned fellow.
right.
And but and I don't, and some people say, I saw Jesus. And then some, a Hindu will say, I saw Jesus, but then people will see a different deity. And I think what I understand, what I've come to believe is that you see what you're welcomed by beings that make you feel safe and that you feel familiar with. So they're not going to throw something at you and shock you. They
Right,
want to say, hey, you know me, because really it doesn't matter what they look like.
right.
It's just love, it's just God, and it's just your angels and spirit guides in my belief. And so they're welcoming you with images of something that you will feel familiar with to welcome
Mhm.
you in. So I do think that every single person's near death experience is valid, and there are different lessons for each person. So I think that's beautiful. And thank you so much, considering that you have done so many interviews. When I first decided to do this podcast, I thought, oh, but these people probably are so tired of doing telling the same story, and why are they going to say yes to me? They've already told it 25 times. But I really appreciate that in every interview, each one of you, there's always something different. There's always something that you said today that you didn't say yesterday. And I just so appreciate your willingness to show up and share what you've learned and be so vulnerable as to share your personal story with people out there, in hopes that it will touch people, inspire people, motivate people, comfort people. And, it sounds to me like what you do is so healing for so many. And I really hope that, um, if nothing, that people who watch this will decide to get on your waiting list, but even just that they'll be touched by something you said and that it will resonate. And I know it will. So I really appreciate you sharing your time and energy with us.
Thank you. It's been my honor, my honor.
Mine too. Thank you, Ginny.